Okay, so now I'm going to ask you a few questions about physical casinos in Britain. What is your view on British casinos branching out into Vegas-style leisure and entertainment complexes? How do you feel the British casino has evolved as a social space?
The honest answer is here, I'm lucky because I travel all over the world and I see lots of casinos all over the world. And when my international visitors come over here and I have to take them to a British casino, I mean Nottingham here, we've got 5 casinos here. We're actually very lucky. We have outside London, I think the biggest proportion of casinos outside of London. They cannot believe how small our casinos are, how limited it is in terms of what you can do in our casinos. So of course, if we want to compete on the international stage and bring in, a kind of Atlantic City or Las Vegas or Macau type experience, we're going to have to radically change our casino structure. Because at the moment, even the biggest ones, you could fit, 20 or 30 of them into, the typical type Las Vegas type casino. Now, obviously, what the Gambling Act did, that was a step for me in the right direction in the sense that casinos became a place where people go to do lots of different things. Now I now probably go to my casino maybe once every 6 months. I do it less now. But when I go in, I have my cheap cordon bleu meal. Okay, it might be a tenner. Okay, for really good quality food at a really cheap price. Slightly subsidised pints, that are cheaper than in the pub. I'll have 2 hours at the roulette table. When I walk out at the end of the evening, I may have been in there 4 or 5 hours, usually with friends, quite often with international visitors when I go. I walk out at the end of the night and I've probably spent £35, £40. Now that's actually cheaper than me watching Nottingham Forest lose. That's actually cheaper than me watching Noel Gallagher at the arena. For a night out, to be fed, drunk and have a good time, 35, 40 quid compared to the things I do is actually really good value. But I'm buying entertainment. Now the thing is, there's a difference between those people who go to casinos because all they want to do is win money, and people like myself who want a lovely social experience with friends that if I win is a complete bonus. So, we're in a situation now in this country where we could have had super casinos in this country, and it was all because when Gordon Brown came in, he was basically anti-gambling and decided that the one super casino that had been given to Manchester, was going to go by the wayside. Now, people were really surprised that the super casino was even going to go to Manchester in the first place, but I think one of the reasons it went to Manchester, because people like me, myself and a guy called Paul Bellringer, we were the co-founders of GamCare, we designed their social responsibility policy. I think the Labour government didn't want to bring in a super casino and have loads of people ending up with problems, so they chose the site and the operators who would have the best infrastructure in terms of player protection, harm minimisation and social responsibility. I was very proud to be part of that bid, and everyone thought it would go to Blackpool, it would go to Sheffield or whatever. It went to Manchester, and I think people actually did read the bids and they thought about the longer term psychosocial impacts of casinos. Now, I think at some point any government is going to realise if we want people to come to Britain and we want to compete on the international stage, is that we're going to have super casinos. People do like to gamble. Now, what I've said is that what you don't have is super casinos built right in the centre of a town. I mean, one of the things that Blackpool things that was going against their bid was that the casino where it was going to be placed was in one of the most socially deprived areas. For me, you have to have an out-of-town thing that people have to make a dedicated decision that they want to go. Now, when I go to Las Vegas, I'm lucky that I go there for academic reasons as well, but basically most people that go to Las Vegas, they know that they're going there to gamble. When you walk into a casino, you know that you're going to gamble. People have made a pre-commitment and a previous decision, and that's what they're going to do. So in terms of this country, I can see definitely a future Conservative or Labour government introducing maybe 4 to 6 super casinos across the country as something that will bring in tourists, and actually will be something that will actually regenerate some of those areas. I'm not anti-gambling in the slightest, and if there's a desire for people to gamble and they want to gamble on those types of things, why do we have so many people going to Las Vegas? It's because we don't get that over here, and it's a completely different cultural experience. My guess is that if we had those super casinos here, people would go in their droves to gamble there.
I mean, the word on the street seems to be actually that people are gambling less in Vegas. They're still going. The number of tourists every year is actually increasing since the doldrums of 2008. But the motivation behind the visits are less gambling and more sort of a holistic travel, entertainment, family holiday?
I went there for a family holiday. Obviously, my kids couldn't gamble, so what did we do? We went to the Grand Canyon, we went to the Hoover Dam. There are loads of things around there that don't involve gambling. But I was there on Memorial Weekend, and of course that was mostly young people, aged 18 to 30, who were just there to gamble and gamble. That's all they were there to do. But of course there are other places. I went to Macau last year. That is just that is not something that's in recession. That's every year is year-on-year increases in terms of people going there to gamble. What do Macau do differently? Well, they have far more table games in proportion to slots, whereas in Las Vegas it's predominantly slot machines. Maybe it's a case that people want different types of gambling experience, and Las Vegas has to move and realise that there are different ways that people gamble now. Traditionally it's always been that slots make the money, but Macau has shown you that you can have a much greater proportion of table games and still be highly profitable.
Okay.
We did some research for some of the Canadian gaming organisations back in the mid-2000s, and we talked about what we called a centralised gaming model, which is basically destination resort gambling, saying in a way that's probably the most socially responsible way of controlling gambling, is having a mecca for people to come where there are just dozens and dozens of casinos. That's what people go to Las Vegas for, is to see all the sights, the sounds, and experience the culture. We could do something like this in this country, but my kind of proviso would be that it has to be outside of a major city. It has to be somewhere people effectively have got to travel to, so they make a pre-commitment to do it. But for me, I think it's much better, for instance, to have maybe 1,000 slot machines housed in a small number of locations, rather than having 2 or 3 and lots spread all over a particular city. I think the problem we've got, of course, is we've got lots of what I call ambient gambling experiences now, where you could be going into one premises, so let's say to get some chips, but you end up gambling. You didn't go in there to gamble, but because there happens to be a gambling opportunity in there, you take the choice, you take that kind of impulse. I think I'll have a go on that. The thing about a casino or a bingo hall or amusement arcade or a bookmaker is when you walk in, you know that you've gone into that particular location to gamble. So the idea of having a destination resort that has maybe 15, 20 different casinos, I'm not anti that at all. What you do have to think about, though, is the local indigenous population. What because those people are going to live there all the time. What are you going to do to protect those people in terms of gambling problems? Because you look at Las Vegas. Why do people who actually live in Las Vegas have the highest proportion of gambling problems in the world? Because they have absolute accessibility and saturation of gambling products in that area.
As you'll remember, the Labour government's 2005 plans for a series of super casinos would have precipitated a shift to Vegas-style complexes, but these plans were shelved due to concerns over the social impact of these kinds of resorts, all these complexes. You sort of already touched on it, but I hope you could maybe elaborate on your thoughts vis-à-vis this position.
Well, to be honest, the real reason why super casinos were stopped is that Gordon Brown, it was his first decision when he took over from Tony Blair as a Presbyterian. He was basically anti-gambling. And that was a classic top-down decision that was made. And I know for a fact that Gordon Brown, who knew the head of Manchester City Council who'd got the super casino, basically told him, this is what I'm going to do. We'll have to think of other ways that we can regenerate money in Manchester. I mean, I'm sorry, there's no, I don't think there's anything else but basically a single decision made by the top man for there not to be a super casino. He probably thought that was a vote winner. Okay, there were, obviously, I know in the run-up to the decision about who was going to get the super casino, there were, the papers were full of gambling stories. I know in terms of the proportion of media that I did in the kind of 4 years pre-September the 1st, right up to when the Gambling Act came in, is that this was people wanted to know what the consequences of a super casino was going to be in their particular area. And of course, I think a lot of people, whether it was a faith group or whether it was anti-gambling groups, were basically saying this is going to cause mass problems on our doorstep. My argument is that there could be a potential to do that, but I think there are lots of ways that we can minimise harm, bring in protective measures to minimise any of those people developing a problem. In terms of regeneration of an area as well, is that my guess is that the overall benefits would probably be more than the disadvantages, but of course we have to weigh up whether those, do we count it in terms of number of people or the amount of money or whatever. I mean, there's different ways of working out cost-benefit analysis of doing something like that. But the decision not to go forward with the super casinos, because each year the plans were revised. Initially it was going to be, maybe 20 super casinos, then it was down to 8, then it was down to 4, then it was down to 1, and it just seemed to be that there was a lot of public pressure that communities saying we don't want these casinos. But to be honest, people didn't want the lottery. People did not want the national lottery. If you said now we're going to get rid of the national lottery now, there'd be a public outcry. I mean, it's so embedded within British culture. My guess is if you had a destination resort, again, what you'd have is something that England would probably be proud of. And again, even though I've spent my lifetime researching problem gambling, doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a super casino. I say I'd be a hypocrite because I do gamble myself, I do go to destination resorts, I do gamble at destination resorts. Why shouldn't I have the opportunity to do that here in my own country? As long as the operator is socially responsible in terms of how they advertise and market their products, decide what they're going to do in terms of protecting their clientele, I've got no problems with that whatsoever.
Again, this draws on themes we've been discussing throughout, but how do you think British casinos and British casino culture compares with that across the world? I know you've already said that you don't really feel that British casino culture is distinct.
No, I mean, right. The problem with British casino culture is that we've not really got a British casino culture, in the sense that our casinos are so small, parochial. Yes, they offer. We've obviously got a hardcore clientele that goes to those casinos. But what's amazing, so here in Nottingham, for instance, our biggest casino, when you walk in, even on a Friday or Saturday night, it still looks relatively empty. We haven't got a culture in this country that people go to casinos regularly. We probably have a lot of kind of high rollers in London, etc., who come in, want to gamble high stakes and go out again. The typical kind of city casinos, my guess is it attracts a very small proportion of those local communities. They're not seen as a kind of destination. They're probably just not very exciting. You could walk past a lot of these casinos and not even know it's there. You can't walk past a Las Vegas or Atlantic City or a Macau casino without realising it's a casino. So I really, in terms of the prevalence of people who go in a casino, less than 5% have visited a casino in the last year, and that's those people may have visited just once. The number of regular casino goers is minimal. Okay, now obviously that minimal amount is generating a lot of profits for the casino industry across the country, so it means they're spending a lot for those who do go in there. But we really haven't got what I would call, we've got what, 120 casinos approximately in this country. I mean, if we had 10 super casinos, okay, I think that would probably generate more money and bring in more visitors and tourists and what have you. But I don't think there is an identifiable British casino culture. I mean, my guess is you ask a casino gambler and they will disagree with me. And I do, I'm one of those, 3 or 4% who go, and I do go more than once a year to a casino. Yes, it's probably part of my job, because obviously when I go in, I play a slot machine in a casino, I call it research. But the fact is that, not, in terms of the British population, they're not really a nation of casino gamblers, at least not yet.
And moving away from British casinos and British casino culture, if indeed there is a British casino culture more generally, casino design is often described as an exercise in psychology. What is your perspective on this?
Yeah, it's that, well, any design of any commercial environment uses psychology. Okay. Now, when it comes to casino design and just basic gambling venue design, there are whole loads of things that are used in terms of basically either to get you in the casino in the first place, and once you're in the casino, to get you gambling more and more. So, for instance, tactics that use in America, for instance, giving free drinks. That's an on-floor situational characteristic that is used to keep people gambling. Now, we don't have it here in this country, and in fact, it's against Gambling Commission guidelines to offer free alcohol. But things like floor layout, like if you go into, say, the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, okay, if you want to go and watch, say, which I did, REM in the arena there, it took me half an hour from when I walked in the entrance to get to the auditorium. In that half an hour, I must have passed, 10 or 15,000 slot machines before I got there. Of course, I had to pass it, when I came out, I had to do it all the way back again. In terms of what's happening while I'm walking through, every time somebody wins on a slot machine, it plays a musical tune, or either ka-chunk, 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 little, But the thing is, of course, you've got 1,000 machines there, maybe 20 of them are paying out, and all you can hear is the sound of winning. The 980 machines that you can't hear the sound of losing. this is all psychology that is used to maximise. It's called what we psychologists call the availability bias. It's about emphasising wins and de-emphasising losing. You know, why is it? You know, on the lottery show each week when it first started, you know, people like Dale Winton used to say, "Hey, we've got Mrs. Jones on this week. You know, she won 3.4 million last week. Here's Mr. You know, here's Mr. Evans. He won 2.1 million last week." What they didn't show was here's the 29.9 million people that didn't win a single thing last week. Now, these are, well, that's another example of the availability bias. But things like the refreshments being on site, things like live entertainment, these are all designed to get people in. You know, people might have come in to watch a show, but of course they want you to have a gamble while you're there. They've brought you into a fantastic restaurant to eat, but while you're there they hope you'll spend some money gambling. These are all kind of lost leaders, but in terms of the way that it's designed, okay, these, you know, casino design is absolutely critical. There's been a whole load of research on what we call service-scapes, is looking at what the best environments are to take money off people in terms of lighting, colour. I mean, things like colour are very important. You know, reds, oranges, yellows, these are kind of exciting colours that are very much associated with gambling. Okay, it's ironic actually that someone like Gala, casino that I gamble at, their corporate colour is blue. And from a psychological perspective, that is a really kind of calming colour. It's not probably the best in a gambling environment. So things like, you know, we've done experiments here at Nottingham Trent University. So for instance, I'm very interested in how music affects gambling. You know, what we've shown is that if you play high beats per minute music while people are gambling, they spend more money. We've manipulated light. We've shown that gamblers spend more under red. You know, they'll gamble faster and spend more under red light than they do under white light. So these invite, you know, in Las Vegas, been a number of experiments showing that if you spray machines with certain types of odour, they can increase the takings on the machine. These are all examples of environmental influence. Okay, now most of those actually I don't think have a massive impact on addiction. Don't have a massive impact on problem gambling. What these have an impact on is usually getting people to gamble on something in the first place. Okay, there may be a little bit in terms of maintaining, but really it's the structural characteristics of the activity itself that dictate if you're vulnerable or susceptible whether you'll develop a problem. But of course, you know, you get all these stories of, you know, supposedly casinos pumping oxygen in to keep people in. You know, the fact there's no clocks around, people can't tell what time it is. You know, all these things happen. You know, there are psychological reasons why they happen. Most of those I don't think have a massive impact in terms of problem gambling. But you know, they may actually keep, you know, someone like myself who's a social gambler in there a little bit longer, spending a little bit more money, but it probably won't turn me into a problem gambler. It's more like to be the structural characteristics.